Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Sarah Plush, Director of Operations here at TransCelerate. We are very excited to offer our eLabels educational webinar directly to our membership today. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. But before we do, I wanted to just make sure that folks on the phone line are able to hear us. I would please ask all of the attendees to just go into their attendee panel and just click the hand icon just to signal to me that you're able to hear the audio clearly. We do have our lines muted today for everyone's listening pleasure, so just want to make sure that everyone's able to hear. Looks like we have people raising their hands, so we'll go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, my name is Sarah Plush. I focus on operations at TransCelerate, and a large part of that is making sure we can bring value and impact to not only our membership, but across the industry. And that's one of the reasons we started this educational webinar series. Raquel Ricardo is also on the line today. She'll be moderating the questions, which I'll give some background in just a few minutes on how to submit questions. And she's also a project manager across all of our work streams in our realized phase. Jennifer Sun is running the operations today on this webinar. If you have any issues with connectivity or problems with the technology, please feel free to drop us an email at our events box. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers today. I'm very excited to have Rocco Barone join us. Rocco is an Associate Director of Operations within the Merck Global Clinical Supply Organization. Rocco started his career at Merck as a site in the planning department. And over the past 12 years, he has taken on different roles of increasing responsibility and is currently overseeing the day-to-day operations planning activities at Merck's 2 facilities. Rocco, thank you so much for joining us today. Next, I'd like to introduce to you Nicole McGeorge. Nicole is currently a Senior Lead Project Manager at Bristol Myers Squibb within the Clinical Supply Operations Packing and Labeling Group. Nicole began working at BMS over 16 years ago as a clinical label designer. Within 1 year, she was promoted to project manager and has led various roles, including outsourcing specialist and head of label operations at the Brunswick facility. Nicole, thanks for joining. And last but not least, excited to welcome Kelly Treason. Kelly is currently the director within Merck's worldwide product labeling group that is within the Global Regulatory Affairs and Clinical Safety. Kelly began working at Merck over 18 years ago within discovery and subsequently moved over to the regulatory role within labeling. Today, Kelly leads the oncology labeling team that supports the global labeling strategy and development for Merck's marketed and developmental oncology products. So I'd like to welcome all 3 of our presenters today. It's a wealth of expertise and knowledge, not only within their member companies they'll be sharing, but certainly within the eLabels TransCelerate initiative. On our agenda today, we're going to spend a few minutes just going over some logistics for this webinar. I'll provide some brief background on TransCelerate, and then most of the time will be spent hearing from our experts about the eLabel initiative itself, and then we'll also talk about the resources that are available to you, and then we'll close with an expert discussion panel. As I mentioned before, all of the lines in this webinar are on mute, just to ensure that everyone can hear the presentation clearly. If you do have a question, certainly we'd ask that you hold that till the discussion panel, but if it's very timely and relevant and it relates to the presentation happening at that moment, we'll do our best to address your question. There should be a question submission box that each attendee should see. You simply type your question and hit send, and then Raquel, who's monitoring, will be reviewing those questions and teeing them up to our presenters when the timing is right. Throughout this presentation, we've also built in some live audience polling. This is completely voluntary and anonymous, and we will certainly tee these questions up as we get to them throughout the presentation. It's a really nice way to just not only engage our audience today, but also get a better understanding of the demographics on the call. Just a few ground rules. As I mentioned, today's presentation includes anyone from our TransCelerate member companies. So certainly, you might be aware of some of TransCelerate's just general operating principles and ground rules, But in order to make the meeting successful, I just wanted to share them with you so that when you do ask your questions to the presenters, you have a bit of an understanding on the things that we can and cannot talk about. So we really can't discuss anything related to vendors or sites or any specific companies. And we certainly can't talk about any long-term development plans or anything related to costs. Even if that cost is somewhat related to implementation, it's really not something that we can talk about today. But we certainly can talk about any questions that you might have around the experience of implementing at one of the member companies from our panelists. We can talk about experience using the tools the team has developed. So I hope that helps with just giving some general guidelines around the types of questions we can expect from our panelists. Okay, so just a quick introduction to TransCelerate in case this is a bit of a new, something new to you. So TransCelerate is a nonprofit organization. We have a shared vision across our 19 member companies, and it's really about improving the health of people around the world. We started in 2012 with 10 member companies and 5 projects. And since then, there's been tremendous growth, not only from our member company perspective, we're up to 19 members, but also from an initiatives perspective with over 25 different initiatives, all in varying phases of their life cycle. So today, eLabels is in a place where we're in the process of gathering some more data so that we can truly realize some of the original goals of this work stream. And we'll let our presenters share more about that. And certainly, doing any work here at TransCelerate would not be possible without these 19 member companies. We actually have over 1,000 people around the globe participating in our work streams. Our work streams are led and staffed by talent from our membership. So certainly that doesn't mean we have 1,000 full-time people. Being involved in TransCelerate really means providing typically a piece of your allocation to help collaborate and deliver that solution across the membership. So we're really excited to have our 3 presenters today who are all part of that eLabels project. We also, since 2012, have been engaging worldwide with various organizations and our actual TransCelerate member companies. So today we have 22 countries where we have engaged with membership at a local level, not only to help increase awareness of TransCelerate solutions, but also to talk about adoption nuances from a local perspective. We also have engaged with 13 health authorities around the world. And certainly, again, it's really around increasing the visibility of the solutions that we develop. And oftentimes, especially if that solution in some way requires some regulatory insight, we want to gain that as part of our solution development. So certainly I mentioned that TransCelerate's comprised of 19 sponsor companies, but we recognize that in order to be successful, we collaborate across a broad spectrum of stakeholders. So that includes investigator sites, the research community, patient advocacy groups. I've already mentioned about health authorities, and of course there's many other associations that we collaborate with. And that collaboration takes on many different forms. Sometimes it's a formal partnership, other times it's socializing our solutions that are in the design phase so that we make sure to design with the right intent in mind to meet that stakeholder's need. But ultimately, it's a very collaborative effort at TransCelerate. This slide really helps show a visual representation of all the work in our portfolio, and we really try to anchor to a few of our strategic objectives, which you can certainly read more about these objectives on the TransCelerate website, but certainly want to make sure that our projects support harmonizing process and sharing information across the industry. We also want to make sure that we have projects that are geared towards improving the patient and the site experience. And then lastly, we want to make sure that our projects help support sponsor efficiencies and drug safety. And as you'll see on this slide, our bolded projects there really just help illustrate some of the new work that we have in 2018. So we're going to do an audience poll now, and I'll just let everyone take a minute to participate in this. So how familiar are you with the eLabels concepts? Maybe this is the first time that you're hearing about eLabels. Maybe you've heard about it, but haven't had a whole lot of experience. Maybe you've been involved in some pilot activities, and maybe you're a bit of an expert and are very well versed in the eLabels concepts, or perhaps none of these really apply to you. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment just to select your answer. And then once we have enough response, we'll go ahead and Jen will share those results back with the audience. Great. So it looks like we have a lot of people on the call today who've heard about eLabels but haven't had a lot of experience with it yet. So that's fantastic. I think this presentation is really going to be valuable for you. So with that, I'm going to, I believe, hand it over to Rocco to take us through a little bit of background.
Thanks so much, Sarah, for the great introduction. So good morning, everybody. As Sarah mentioned, my name's Rocco Barone. I work at Merck. I've spent many, many years working and overseeing our clinical label operations group. So I know all too well a lot of the challenges we face on a day-to-day basis with our paper labels. I've had the pleasure of working on the TransCelerate's eLabels workstream since things were kicked off a few years back, and I'm very excited to be here today to kind of take you through initially some of the background with eLabels. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So before we actually get into the eLabels content itself and the project and the great work that was done through the TransCelerate workstream, I always like to level set and start off with the why, just so we know, what reason did we go down this road for. And really, technology is really mainstream in all of our lives, from the way we travel to the way we bank. And even in clinical trials, there's different various technologies that are being introduced, like e-diaries and wearables. So technology is really mainstream, but the way we conduct and develop our paper labels for our clinical supplies really hasn't followed suit. Next slide, please. And really, as I said, the paper labels themselves, they really haven't transitioned to incorporate some technology. But what we've done is we've looked at the paper labels themselves and we looked at some of the challenges. Why are these a challenge? Why do we struggle with them? What's the problem? So it's really threefold from a patient, site, and sponsor standpoint. So from a patient and site standpoint, they really don't find the book of labels a user-friendly solution. The labels are big, they're bulky, there's a ton of information that's included. It's really difficult for the sites and patients to find the information that they're looking for. So those things end up leading to misdosing or some challenges with dispensing the right medication. And then from a sponsor standpoint, these booklet labels, for those that have experienced creating them, it takes a very long time to get those into place. There's a lot of upfront work that's required, and I'll go through some of that a little bit further into the slides. But all of that information needs to be produced into this booklet label, and then it becomes very static. It's very difficult to update it because once we have those labels printed, we can't make changes. And in the world of clinical supplies, changes occur a lot. There's changes with the expiry date, there's changes with dosing instructions, or there's changes that are needed as a result of errors. Human error is a big element. Things happen, people make mistakes, but once we have those labels printed, it's very difficult to change them. So really, there's a lot of issues from a sponsor standpoint that really are driving the desire to have a more flexible solution. And then also from that patient site standpoint, providing something to them that's a little bit more user-friendly than this paper label that contains all this information that's in a small font and difficult to read and find your information. So that's really the challenge. That's the genesis behind why we need to explore something else. Next slide, please. So to do this, TransCelerate in March of 2015 put together a team with a lot of good representation from the pharma industry. And this team started to look at, okay, we know we have these challenges and these problems with our booklet labels, these paper labels. What can we do about it? How can we make eLabels a reality? And the team really started by creating 3 sub-work streams, I would call them. So there was a smaller team dedicated to putting together a toolkit, or what we like to call a playbook. And what this toolkit was and is really a guideline for member companies and those that join thereafter for them to put together an eLabel platform in their own member company. So again, as Sarah said, we really weren't looking at CROs or vendors that have platforms or software, hardware out there. What we wanted to do was put together a toolkit that would help the member companies kind of facilitate adoption. So here's some things that you would need to consider from a process standpoint. Here's some risk assessments, some risks that you would need to evaluate before you would start working on putting that platform into place. Here's some guideline information that would help facilitate discussions with some of your regulatory counterparts. So that toolkit was really a really important first step, and really helps now serve as a guideline and a playbook for all of the member companies and all of the companies that are joining thereafter. It's actually available now on the website for those to look at, and it's a very big document. There's a ton of information there, a lot of good information, and really helps you move in that direction of endorsing eLabels at your company, and really helping put the proposal together for putting something into place. The other bucket, the second bucket, was really looking at the health authority landscape. So we recognized that transitioning from paper labels to electronic labels, we couldn't just do that. There had to be some discussions with our health authorities to actually get their endorsement and their acceptance of eLabels. So a sub-team was put together to start to look at what are the regulatory requirements in the different countries, because we recognize when you go from the US to the EU, there's many different regulatory requirements and different things that need to be considered. So a team started to look at what does that landscape look like, and how can we start to engage those health authorities to propose eLabels and our vision for what that could look like. The third team was really a technology-focused team. Again, they weren't looking at specific hardware or software, but rather they were looking at putting together what an eLabel could look like. How could this look like at the various member companies? What could we include, like drop downs, different information that would be displayed on the eLabel, the different scanning mechanisms that could be utilized, like 2D barcode technology, near field communication, among others, and putting together a proof of concept that we could use sort of as show and tell for those discussions with the health authorities, and also at external engagements like conferences and different discussion forums. Because I think really the way to endorse and adopt this is through showing. We could talk about it, but having something that we could use as an example really helped facilitate those discussions. And then also what we're highlighting on the screen here on the right side is where we are as a team. So as I said, the team was initiated back in March of 2015, a few years back now, and we've really made good progress. So we are in the deploy stage, and right now we're primarily focused on raising a lot of eLabel awareness through things like this webinar and our external engagements. We've published a nice white paper. That white paper really takes you through the eLabel concepts and debunks some myths that are associated with eLabels. We're starting to collect some pilot information from some of the member companies that are actually moving forward with putting platforms into place and starting to conduct pilot studies. So a lot of activity is still ongoing, even though we're in the deploy phase. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the why. We talked a little bit about how through TransCelerate. Now let's talk a little bit about the what. So what are we actually proposing? Because one thing I always like to mention at this point is there's other options in terms of electronic labeling, but the option that we're talking about today is the TransCelerate proposal, and the proposal we put together through the TransCelerate eLabels team. And what that proposal really is transitioning away from paper labels, those booklet labels, that's the current state, and moving forward with two things. One being a universal printed label. So that's still a printed label. That would be applied to your bottle, your kit, your syringe. And then also your full electronic label. So the label that would be scannable through 2D or through near field communication. And that clinical label would be displayed on your smart device. Here on the screen we have a picture of a smartphone. That label would come up and would be visible to the patient or the site. The full information would be visible, the dosing instructions, the storage condition, the regulatory requirements, and it would be visible in their local language. And then also on the bottle or the kit, you would have this universal label. Some like to call it an untranslatable label because the information that we're including on the universal label is not physical text. It's untranslatable information, and I'll go into the details of what that would include on the next slide. So next slide, please. So the universal printed label itself, really what is included here is some basic information that we do not want to translate. So the information could include, through our suggestion, we would want to have the company name there. Obviously, we would want to have, who's sponsoring the trial. We would want to have a web address, and the purpose of that web address would sort of serve as a backup. So if we have electronic challenges with accessing the full clinical label, there would be that website that the patient or site could refer back to then to pull up that potentially a PDF of that clinical label or other information on how to mitigate that issue. We also felt that it would be important to include the storage conditions and a keep out of reach pictogram. So a picture would signify the text itself. So instead of printing keep out of reach of children and the actual storage conditions, we would include these pictograms to help facilitate that. And we would also need some sort of access point. So the picture here includes a 2D barcode. But again, as I had mentioned already, you could use different forms of technology like near field communication or something like e-ink where information is completely transmitted electronically. And then also you need an identification number for traceability, ensuring correct dispensation to the patient. Next slide, please. So at this point, the various whys, how we went about it, and what we're proposing. So now we like to obviously talk about the benefits associated. I know I touched on a little bit of this already, but some of the benefits associated with transitioning to this approach. So we feel there'd be enhanced safety and utility for the patients. So I know further down in the slide, my colleagues Nicole and Kelly will talk a little bit about some of the feedback we received when we demoed this, the proof of concept and some of our concepts to some of our patient and site stakeholders that we engaged, and they really liked the eLabel proposal, and we felt that there would be increased safety and utility for the patients because they would now no longer be constrained by that small font, the difficulties associated with finding the information on the booklet label, because that information would be visible to them in their local language on that smart device. We feel that also we would encounter some increased patient compliance because no longer would they find it as challenging to find the right information, whereas today the information is difficult to find and it could lead to some misdosing. From a sponsor standpoint, and I'll get into this in a subsequent slide, it's a much easier process to approve and modify labels. We're also through this proposal, we're able to reduce the use of booklet labels, and as I said, booklet labels, because of all the information that needs to be included, results in difficulties with reading them. And then also this allows us to introduce pooling strategies which allow us to decrease waste pretty significantly. Next slide, please. So this is a pretty busy slide, but it's one that I always like to include because from a sponsor standpoint, it really highlights some significant cycle time advantages associated with transitioning to this process. And I'm not going to take us through, because we're short on time today, all the various steps, but what I'd like to call out is really the fact that you're introducing parallel processing when you're transitioning to this eLabels model. No longer are you required to do all of that upfront work with manufacturing, getting your text proofed, and getting all of that stuff done so far in advance because you need all of that production time to physically print those labels and get them shipped to your packaging locations. Now, in the eLabels model, you could really design those labels and then just formalize them right before you're going to release. You have that opportunity to make those changes and do those different things that really not only allow you to save time, but also provide a great deal of flexibility when you're waiting for information like additional data for your expiry date and stuff like that. So really, this is a powerful slide in terms of cycle time savings and the flexibility associated with transitioning to an eLabels model. Next slide, please. Again, I'll go through this slide pretty quickly, but my colleagues Nicole and Kelly will talk a little bit about some of the information around our regulatory discussions, and that sort of leads into the approach for introducing a label, and this is just an example. So the stage we're in now, the current stage would be the paper label, obviously. The next stage, we thought, based on some potential challenges that Kelly will talk a little bit about in terms of health authority engagement, but maybe stage 2 would be introduce an e-label and also the a dual approach where we have a paper label and an e-label, because some countries may not be completely on board with just transitioning straight away from paper to e-label. They may want both a booklet label and the e-label to demonstrate its effectiveness and its usefulness in some clinical trials before we transition into stage 3 and 4, where we could leverage the e-label completely and gain all of the benefits. So again, this is just representative of how we could introduce this slowly in a stepwise approach where we're not rushing from A to Z. I mean, it's really important that we take this step by step because we are introducing a big change here. We recognize that, but you know, with any new technology being introduced, there's going to be some hesitation, but once the end users have an opportunity to use it and really see its ease of use and its effectiveness, we you know, are hoping that it's going to be more widely adopted and we can transition to, you know, the full e-label proposal. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'll stop. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nicole. I know I went through a great deal of information. We had some great questions submitted already, so we'll address some of those questions at the end, but certainly we'll try to address any other questions that you have, you know, either during the webinar or maybe offline. So Nicole, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rocco. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to take you a little bit on what we've heard from our sites and our patient feedback. So as you can see, the TransCelerate team has been and is still working very diligently on gathering feedback and getting viable input from many of our stakeholders. When possible, we've incorporated this feedback into our deliverables, such as our toolkit that Rocco mentioned, and we will continue to do so as we obtain input. So as you can see from this slide, there are stakeholders. These are the stakeholders that we've engaged with. They include many of our health authority agencies, our industry organizations, as well as our patients and sites via our site advisory groups and our patient advisory groups. Next slide, please. So this slide, again, a lot of information on here. This kind of summarizes what our insights on eLabels from our patients and sites. So the eLabels team has collected feedback from across a number of global sites and are utilizing ISP patient surveys that were also conducted globally. So we have discussed the eLabels project with over 65 sites, ranging from EU to US, Latin America, and even Japan, as well as over 5,000 patients that we've asked questions. And the questions that we've asked are really regarding labels in general. They're not specifically focused on eLabels. So we heard as patients responded, they most value instructions that are given to them from site personnel verbally. However, patients responded that their preferred method to obtain information is electronically, either through email or even through text. Our TransCelerate eLabels team also engaged with the patient advisory group, and the purpose of this was to obtain feedback on the usability of current printed labels, pictograms, and our TransCelerate wireframe. So for those of you that are not aware, there actually is a video of our TransCelerate wireframe available on the TransCelerate website. The feedback that we heard specifically on the booklets is that font is too small. The booklet label can be difficult to open, and most patients even admitted that they rarely open the booklets because they find it difficult to find what they're looking for. So they are relying on what's being told verbally by the pharmacist or the site. In addition, the printed label sometimes doesn't contain the information that they're looking for. Feedback that we heard on our wireframe was that the design is clean, the pictograms are simple, and they're easy to understand. And patients also like the search functionality as well as being able to select their local language. When it comes to the sites, what we heard is that they agreed that eLabels would enhance the readability and would eliminate relabeling at sites for use dates. This in turn reduces the potential of human error and allows sites to spend more time focusing on the patient versus spending time logging in material, relabeling, and even doing manual accountability in some cases. So overall, sites have been supportive of this eLabels concept. Next slide. So this slide discusses a little bit feedback regarding the seniors, which has been a common theme that we saw in our engagements. Trends indicate that there actually is an upward climb for the seniors' acceptance of technology, but it's important to understand that the level of ability for seniors to use or even have at their disposal the appropriate technology should be a consideration for any company that chooses to use the eLabel solution. So here we have some statistics. Some are TransCelerate's based and some were found through research from our patient advisory group. So first was a survey that was conducted by Syscript on behalf of TransCelerate, and it was over 3,000 patients, 827 of them of which were over 65. And what we learned is that 87% of those 65 and older are actually comfortable with electronic devices, whether it be a laptop or a tablet or a smartphone. An AARP fact sheet showed that among those 50 years of age and over, adoption of a mobile device is 89%, and nearly 9 in 10 of U.S. adults over 50 own some type of mobile device, and nearly 75% of adults between ages 50 and 59 actually own a smartphone. A Pew Research Center showed that in 16 years, use of the internet for those 65 and over has increased from 14% in 2000 to 64% in 2016. In Australia, the use of internet among seniors 65 and older is also increasing. From 2011, there was 65% to in 2015, there were at 79%. And the same statistic in the UK among the seniors, increased from 52% in 2011 to 78% in 2017. So overall, the feedback we are hearing from patients is positive, and patients are open to new technology and to change. So eLabels also had the opportunity to work with the site advisory group in a simulation engagement. So back in March 2017, one of our member companies actually hosted a simulation exercise with members of the eLabel SAG group, and it was held at the City University of New York Simulation Center. We call it the New York Sim Center. So this allowed us to simulate using an eLabel as part of an investigator meeting and initial patient visit. Our site advisory group is comprised of 3 investigators, 3 pharmacists, and 6 coordinator and/or site staff. 8 were members from the U.S., 2 from South America, 1 from EU, and 1 from Australia. And our objective or our goal was to use simulations of eLabels related processes and their tools to understand how we could use clinical sites to enhance the experience and improve the ability to perform clinical trials and engage with patients. So what happened is that the site advisory group members were separated into 3 groups, and they had to work together on simulations that was actually facilitated by a member of the New York Sim Center. It wasn't a facilitator of the site advisory groups. We had an independent person facilitating the session. There were 3 simulations. The first one was actually representative of an investigator meeting where we were discussing the eLabel related technologies for a new medication, and we have an image of that on the slide. Our second simulation was representative of a site where the eLabel allowed for specific inventory and pharmacy management processes. And our third simulation was also representative of a site, but it's where we instead simulated patient interaction by dispensing drugs to individuals, including the elderly. So overall, SAG members felt the technologies and the approaches were headed in the right direction, and they provided hope for some of the issues that they experienced. We heard some small steps may be necessary, but moving in this electronic direction is a must. And they appreciate that we're fleshing this out and are visiting with our regulatory health authorities. They also find the eLabels to be exciting, promising, and easy to use. Next slide, please. So this slide goes into some of the, I don't say negatives, but we had some positive feedback. We also had some takeaways that we highlighted here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, I'll start at the 1 o'clock position and work my way around, and just going to give you some key points. So first was our consistency across sponsors. Realize that it's considered highly valuable as there's a potential to minimize the time for a site to learn and to maintain the knowledge on an app or hardware. So while TransCelerate does acknowledge this feedback, unfortunately, TransCelerate is not set up into developing standards or consistency across the companies. So it's up to each company to determine if and how they want to move forward with eLabels. Next comes down to space at sites. So as you know, some sites have limited space available. They have some have entire rooms are actually dedicated to holding materials sent by a sponsor for a study, especially when a site does multiple studies. So packaging around the items shipped to the site, the amount of hardware required, and other sponsor-provided items are all opportunities to look for efficiencies. Next, we have enabling site communication with a patient. So tools shared were perceived as advantageous because they could facilitate connections with our patients. But sponsors should also look for ways to allow patients to continuously engage and interact with the technology. And this can be done through notifications, either alarms for taken medications, or even allowing the site to add in appointment reminders, continuing that engagement between site and patients. Allowing the site personnel to actually be the experts. So instructions through training, they should be simple and they should be clear. We should be able to provide sufficient training to allow sites to become experts for patient-facing technologies and ensure the sites can answer questions quickly. This will instill some sort of confidence in the technology. The patients can see that, a question is asked and the site can immediately, answer the question. So this again, this can be done through training. Technology aversion. It's important to understand that it's not just the elderly. There should be consideration taken into military personnel that are just leaving the armed forces, patients with limited finances, and those that have concerns with patient privacy should also be considered. Encouraging patient engagement with technology. So companies should look for meaningful ways to allow patients to have regular interactions with technology, again, either through alarms or site adding visit reminders. We should be considerate of avoiding overcomplicating or non-value added activities. And last is our connection to systems and hardware. So immediately the first one that comes to point, of course, is our IRT system. But there should also see opportunities for connectivity to other e-initiatives such as ePro, eConsent, and eDiary. We should minimize the patient and the site hardware, software, apps, and even sign-ons. So maybe think about having one application and a single log on for patients. But keep in mind that it is a challenge for TransCelerate to address everything that we heard, as it ultimately will be up to the sponsor to determine how they want to implement eLabels. But we did find the session highly valuable and very productive. And again, we will continue to use the feedback that we hear from patients and sites and incorporate them into future deliverables. So next, I'll pass it on to Kelly, who's going to give you a little overview on our health authority engagement feedback.
Great, thanks, Nicole. So in addition to collecting feedback from patients and sites that Nicole just described, TransCelerate's eLabel team has engaged with health authorities to obtain their feedback on the eLabel. To date, the eLabels team has met with 6 health authorities over 2016 and 2017. And health authorities were selected by the team based on their level of influence, the number of studies that are conducted in that country, the perceived technology receptivity, and the willingness to meet with industry. Currently, there are no regulations that preclude the use of an eLabel, and health authorities did not have issues with the concept of the eLabel technology. Sponsors are able to utilize the technology to provide the label content in all geographies as long as the printed label meets local regulations. So many health authorities expressed concern about what would remain on the physical label. So reducing the printed label content is not yet a viable option in all geographic locations. So this goes back to the point that Rocco made earlier, that you may have to have a staged approach whereby you still have the printed label as you're moving into the eLabel space, because all regulations won't allow you to reduce that printed label content. So on this slide, it depicts the interaction with 4 of those 6 health authorities. So the EMA in Europe, the FDA in the US, TFDA in Taiwan, and MSDS in Korea. And then in the next slide, I'll speak about Health Canada and the MHRA in the UK. So with the EMA, they expressed that eLabels will be extremely challenging, especially given Annex 6. They stated that a universal printed label would not be compliant with Annex 13 requirements. They offered to participate in e-initiatives cross-health authority meetings to determine the implementation options. And with the FDA, they had no questions regarding the eLabel technology or the use of an electronic means to transmit the label information. They did question if a pictogram could solely represent the cautionary statement on the universal label, but they did indicate that the eLabel team does not need to return until there is something specific to share, such as pilot data. And with the TFDA in Taiwan, they were open and receptive to the eLabel concept. There were no perceived barriers to implementing eLabels. They would like to see data in Taiwanese patients, particularly the elderly. It is not mandatory to get approval prior to pilot execution in Taiwan, and they offered to conduct a pilot there. And similar to Taiwan, the MFCS in Korea also wanted to see additional data from patients, particularly the elderly, but also from Korean pharmacists. They stated that the universal printed label would not meet Annex 13 requirements. They currently allow additional information via barcode on commercial label and view eLabel as adjunctive, and they have issued draft guidance on pictograms for commercial labels. Next slide. So additionally, the eLabel team met with Health Canada and the MHRA in the UK. So for Health Canada, they appreciated the attention given to the e-initiatives as the direction of the future and indicated alignment with their and ICH future direction. They indicated that there was general support of eLabels concepts and noted having had several discussions with individual companies on the concept. They suggested that we be aware of convergence of post-approval studies and clinical trials, and they mentioned that they will be publishing industry non-prescription codes for fact tables on July 31st, and they're also coming out with QR codes on a landing page. And we are exploring additional opportunities to meet with Health Canada. It did not occur in 2017, but we are looking for that to occur in 2018. And the MHRA was collaborative and encouraged continued dialogue on the topic. They indicated that while they are bound by regulations for what is on the physical label, there may be situations such as clinic-run studies where some flexibility may exist. They're willing to accept that dual approach, but a discussion approximately 3 months before is needed. They're pragmatic about the direction we need to head. They have no current plans to change from when Annex 6 is issued. The implications of Brexit are unknown at the time. They agreed that relabeling provides opportunity for error. They would have accepted IRT control of expiry date, but Annex 6 does preclude this. They like the promise of eLabels and additionally the opportunity to enrich the label. So by enriching, we mean we could add instructional videos, recall notifications to that eLabel. They provided a caution to not repeat the information on the physical label in a video, and they wanted the team to further think through emergency situations. So in addition, the team met with FPIA. So FPIA is not a health authority. They are an industry organization that represents the pharmaceutical industry operating in Europe. So with FPIA, there was continued agreement with the eLabels direction. They were supportive of our engagement with patient site groups as a way to provide their perspective to other stakeholders. They indicated that pilot data would be useful to demonstrate regulations that can be met using modern tools, and FPIA is working with EMA to develop a reflection paper on a commercial eLabels technical pilot that FPIA will share with us. So overall, utilizing a printed label with reduced content and the universal label, along with technology, may take additional time and require experimental data for some health authorities' acceptance. In some cases, regulations will need to be modified. implementing an eLabel where allowed and gathering data via patient and site surveys will further acceptance by health authorities globally. And we are looking at this globally, and additional health authority interactions, including those in Asia and South America, are planned for this year. Next slide. So I'll go through eLabels. So looking ahead, where we want to go with eLabels. So this slide depicts where we've been and where we're going. So to better understand where we're going, it's good to have a knowledge of where the team's been. So this is a summary of kind of where Rocco started and where we'll end. So as you can see, we launched this initiative in 2015, and through 2015 and 2016, the team worked to establish and deliver version 1 of the toolkit for implementation and to assist with health authority engagements. During that same time and into 2017, the team performed technology assessment and established the eLabel wireframe. The wireframe was developed for engagements with stakeholders, including the health authority. In addition, in 2017, version 2 of the toolkit was released. Through 2016 and 2017, the team was actively working on patient, site, health authority, and industry engagements. And as we move into 2018, the team has been working on gathering pilot data. So pilots are being run by Janssen, Lilly, Sanofi, and Merck. These pilots will be different. Some will be mock, some will be phase 2. Country participation will be different. But in addition, in 2018, the new website was launched, and we are continuing our external engagements. Next slide. And to further drill down on our health authority engagements this year, we are planning on engaging with Australia, Japan, Spain, and Brazil for the first time. In addition, we are looking to have follow-up meetings with FPIA and Canada. In addition, as we collect examples of successful pilot implementation that will demonstrate the value of the solution, we will be able to further assess if further health authority engagements will be necessary. Next slide. So I think this next set of slides, we're going to go through some of the resources that are available to you all for eLabels. Next slide. So this is our next audience poll. So we wanted to address with you what TransCelerate eLabel resources have you heard of? So on your screen, you should see the polling question. So have you heard of eLabels design and delivery toolkit? Have you heard about our publication? Have you heard about the eLabel business case template? Have you heard about the wireframe, or none of the above? We'll give you a few seconds to respond to that. Okay, so the majority of folks on the phone have not heard about any of the resources. So the next section of the presentation will be great for you, because we'll go over where you can find some of these resources. So the next slide. So many of the resources that were just described in the audience poll are available directly to you through the updated web page, and the link is on this slide. And these slides will be shared with you shortly after the conclusion of this webinar. The tools available will support implementation planning from the publications, business case template, systems inventory template, and roles template. And then the new website is truly a great resource, which gives you the background and resources you need. Next slide. And on the website, there are 2 videos. One of the videos on the website that's there is the proof of concept video that describes how that technology works. So the link on this slide will take you directly to that video, which you'll be able to view following the webinar. The TransCelerate proof of concept video demonstrates the use of cases for a foundational eLabel described in the toolkit and the possible enhancements that can be made through the use of an eLabel. So as Rocco had described, it works by scanning the barcode on the clinical package to access the eLabel information. The user interface is interactive, and simply scrolling allows access to the clinical information. And information can be visible at all times and expanded when needed, and you can find information through a search function. So at its foundation, the eLabel would include the identification of the medication, the caution and warning statements, the drug and usage information, which includes directions for use, the storage conditions and expiry dates, and the contact and study sponsor information. So those are the foundational elements of the eLabel. And then additionally, the eLabel will allow patients to select their choice of language and configure the text size. So eLabel functionality can go further to include enhanced features such as providing important update information, such as when an expiry date has been updated through immediate notification. Another enhancement would be the inclusion of images and instructional videos as reminders to patients once they leave the clinic. And it can provide direct access to other e-applications that may be part of the study. So the eLabel initiative is leveraging technology to provide label content via user-friendly electronic interface. It will allow enhanced access to up-to-date information about the investigational product, and it will enable change from a static paper process to a more innovative, advanced, and flexible approach to support patient centricity and patient engagement. So next slide. So to close out the session, we'll leave you with this. Quotes from our internal member companies that are realizing the value of eLabels. So based on the quotes, you can see that colleagues from member companies have used the design and delivery toolkits to help with their internal assessment of eLabel implementation within their own company. In addition, this initiative has offered a way for us in industry to connect with each other, to introduce consistency into the process, and the collaboration across industry had allowed us to make some strides in achieving health authority acceptance of eLabels. And next slide. And I think at this point, we'll move into the expert discussion panel.
Great, this is Raquel Ricardo from TransCelerate, just opening up our expert panel. Thank you to everyone that registered for the event and pre-submitted some questions. And we did have a couple of questions from our audience prior to the webinar that our experts would like to answer for you. The first one to talk about their own experiences were, what are your thoughts on regulatory implications for eLabels, including differences among regions, countries, and that sort of thing?
So Kelly, did you want me to take this one? I think you had asked me when we were chatting if I should take this one.
Sure, go ahead, Rocco.
Okay. So, I mean, this is definitely, we touched on this a little bit throughout the slides. I think it was kind of a combination between myself and Kelly with the information that we shared. But regulatory implications, excuse me, for eLabels is going to vary. I mean, as Kelly pointed, the discussions that we had with some of the health authorities, some seemed to be okay with the concept, some didn't. So really, what it's going to take here is we're going to have to, in some instances, go with a dual approach. We're going to have to provide the paper label, and then we're going to leverage the eLabel. And I think that anytime, you know, personally throughout history, when you introduce new technology, there's always some hesitation, but once the end user gets comfortable with it, they see the benefits, they see the value, they're actually able to use it and be comfortable with it, I think adoption becomes much more smoother. And I think that's what we plan on here. We're going to introduce it where we can, and if we have to go with the dual approach, we go with the dual approach. We collect that feedback, we run good surveys, you know, stakeholder groups to show those regulators, that those health authority agencies that, hey, we've gotten this feedback, we've tried pilots, things are going well, people like this a lot, you know, how about we transition out of what we're doing and influence them to adopt eLabels? I think that's really the route that we're gonna have to take, but it's certainly gonna be staged. You know, as Kelly had mentioned, you know, the member companies are taking various approaches. Some are starting small, some are starting bigger, you know, and I think that really at the end of the day, member company getting involved and doing something will all work towards us realizing the end goal of really getting away from a paper-based label. So hopefully I answered the question as it was asked.
Thanks, Rocco. We did have a question come in live from the audience, which is interesting. And the question is, how does eLabel track patient compliance?
So Again, that's going to all depend on the hardware, software platform that each individual member company selects. So the TransCelerate team really focused on what do we want to do, not what system are we going to use. That's really outside of scope of this team. So that would really depend on the system that the member company chooses to put forth. From my experience, I think that is a module, I would call it, or an enhancement that is available. But again, it would be, what do you want in your software hardware platform, and what can that vendor provide you, is the best way I could answer that.
Great, thank you. I think we can probably move on to our next pre-submitted question, which is actually asking about eLabels and auditing trails and tracking IP expiration dates. Maybe you can give us some insight on that.
I think that funnels into the same polling question that was just asked, and that this is all going to be part of your application, so your platform. So, just like when you're developing paper labels, you have a system that you're using to facilitate that process. So, an end user goes in and enters label text, and there's an approval process, and there's an audit trail that shows user activity in the current state. Same thing in the future state. So your eLabel platform should have all of that auditing trail and tracking information that shows who did what, when they did it, who accessed the system, when they accessed the system, what they did in the system. All of those things have to be built into that compliant platform that you put into place at your own, each individual at your own member company.
Do any of our other panel speakers want to share their experiences within their own companies? I think our audience is really interested in getting a little bit of final words from any one of the three of you to talk about your own experiences as well.
So unfortunately, BMS is not right now in the process of conducting any pilots. We hope to in the near future. So from experience from Bristol Myers Squibb, I don't really have much I can provide on that.
And Kelly and I are both from Merck, so I can speak on behalf of that, since I'm leading up the few projects. We have a couple projects ongoing, eLabel projects right now. Things are going well. We're introducing sort of a smaller step first, where we're using part of the information electronically. We're calling it sort of a soft opening, so that we can start with something that we know is acceptable, and then from there take a stepwise approach to introducing the full electronic label. But we haven't started with any pilots yet. We had one kind of trial run in the U.S. only. We did receive some very good feedback about the ease of use from the site, but we're actively working on validating our technology platform and then introducing it in the next couple of months to where we can start using it in a couple clinical trials that we have marked for our first few studies.
But there are some member companies. I think Kelly went through the list of those that are actually conducting pilots. We do have a member of the LEADS team that is actually gathering that pilot data, and we hope to have some information at the end of the year, maybe early next year, that we should be able to share with our member companies.
Great, thank you. We do have a couple minutes left. There are not additional questions coming through from our live question box at the moment. So I did want to flip to the next slide, Jen, if we can, just to take a final poll from the audience about the value the webinar provided for you. If you would take a chance in our attendees to take that poll quickly, we'd love to get your feedback just as you've been attending today. Great, I think we can close that ahead then, Jen. Great. It looks like people got a lot of value out of our introduction to eLabels, which is great, and we're so happy to have all of you join. If you flip to our next slide, I think it's just some final information for the audience. We do want to thank everyone for registering and for attending, and especially to our presenters, Kelly, Rocco, and Nicole, for not only working on this work stream diligently and leading the work stream now as it's in realization, but also for presenting for us. We do appreciate all of your time today, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah and Raquel and Jen, and thanks everyone for attending today.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.